Then they can ask their own questions.
Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Ariel Yurim Chung. I go by she, her, and I'm this year's Shootout coordinator. Brief explanation, the Asian American Film Lab is a nonprofit devoted to the promotion and support of gender and racial parity in film and television programming. And the 72-hour Shootout is the Film Lab's annual global filmmaking competition, celebrating diversity in front of and behind the camera. This workshop is part of the Shootout's programming to increase accessibility and help our fellow filmmakers to take a step further into their career or artistic endeavor. So I'm going to give this platform to Cheryl, who is our board member and also an amazing writer. Take it away, Cheryl.
Well, thank you, Ariel. As you so beautifully introduced me, my name is Cheryl Davis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm going to preface this with saying that take or use anything that I give you as it suits you. If you've taken part in a writing workshop or even gotten feedback on your work, you know, everybody has an opinion on what you should be writing and how you should write it. But a part of your job as a writer to figure out what you want to say and the best way to say it. And I'm just trying to toss some tools at you. Okay, so let me find this. Here we go, ta-da! Some writing tips and tricks. And I also hasten to say that this is going to be primarily a conversation. Admittedly, I'm going to start doing a lot of the talking, but you can ask questions and make statements at any time, especially since we have such a wonderfully intimate gathering here. And so let me start with telling you, well, actually, come on. Oh. Here we go. Yes, thank you. Here are some of the topics we're going to hit today. Both in terms of like writing topics and in terms of some tips: characters, story, dialogue, or voice, some craft tricks, crafts ahoy, and what do you want to say? Starting with characters, let me tell you a bit about me. I am a Black woman with 3 Ivy League degrees. I am a general counsel who also writes for the soap opera Days of Our Lives. I love to bake and watch the Food Network. I often wear a necklace to hide a tracheotomy scar I got after I was in a medically induced coma. And I was raised a good Baptist girl, but I religiously read Susan Miller astrology on a monthly and daily basis. And have you ever seen a character like me? No? Then why don't you write one? Because the idea is that characters are real people with all their inconsistencies and quirks. I mean, things like if you were a loyal Scandal watcher as I was, we all knew that Olivia Pope drank red wine and loved eating her popcorn. And that's just something she did. But everybody has their own tricks and quirks. And your characters should too. If you want to have people who are more than just a job description, give them personality, give them quirks. Think of interesting things for them to do or like or to nerd or geek out on. So you've got your characters. Now what? When I started writing, when I got into the whole theater and in industry, I wanted to be an actress, and I started looking for roles that I wanted to play. And when I couldn't find a lot of them, being a chubby Black girl who could not belt, I decided to write roles for myself. And then I just realized that I started wanting to watch more than I wanted to actually act. And I enjoyed writing more than acting. And I started writing characters that I wanted to watch, which is something I highly recommend. So you've got your characters, which I think is at the base of a lot of drama. So now what? There's what we call story and what we call plot. And as you see here, it says, the king died and then the queen died is a story. It's a simple statement of fact. The king died and then the queen died of grief is a plot. This plot refers to the sequence of events in a story which affect other events through the principle of cause and effect. And the causal effects of a plot can be thought of as a series of sentences linked by and so. For example, you can describe a lot of TV shows that way. For example, if I were to describe like Breaking Bad in a really brief log line, I gather that the writers, when they were coming up with the idea, wanted to show, their concept was showing Mr. Chips, who was this 1960s like English teacher, Mr. Chips becoming Scarface. How does that happen? And over the course of the series, they drafted that transition. But if you were to come up with a log line for the show, you could say things like, oh, Walter White is a teacher who becomes a drug lord. Like, yeah, you could say that. But you could also say that Walter White is a teacher suffering from cancer who is afraid of what his family is going to do once he passes away. So in order to make money for his family, he becomes a drug lord. There's more to the show than that, but that gives you, you can see there's an impetus that gives him a goal and an understandable reason for doing what he does. So I'm already a little more perked up, like, oh, I'm interested now. I can see a little bit, well, this Walter White guy, what, I don't agree with his choice, but I can understand why he's doing what he's doing. It's kind of like Sweeney Todd the musical. I can understand seeking vengeance. I can't agree with chopping people into pies and putting them into pies. So now when you've got a story, you've got some characters in a story, what you also want to have are stakes. Why should we care that we're watching this person? Why should we care to spend time with these people? And for example, like Walter White, if you're caring by hope, they hope because this guy's dying and he's got to support his family. And it's a quirky way to do it, but you want to know, is he going to do it? And if he does manage to sell drugs to support his family, then what happens then? God, that's a high stakes environment. That's really risky. He could die that way. So you got all of these expensive stakes. So one other way of putting it is like you can, what you like to do is like stick your character up a metaphorical tree and throw rocks at them, make them have to work to achieve their goals. So, I mean, even in a short piece, probably you're going to have somebody who wants something and they do something to get it. And what makes it more interesting is the more rocks you throw at them, the more obstacles you put in their path. So they have to become more and more creative to get what they want, or to figure out, you know what, maybe what I thought I wanted isn't actually what I really want or need. So now we've gotten to my point about dialogue. Uh, Now, one thing about your voice is your voice is your voice. Please don't try to write like anybody else. As much as you adore how they write, you can do it. Don't try to do it unless it's as an exercise, or if you're doing like a spec script to get into a fellowship, then try to write like anybody else. And of course, as I'm backtracking here, as of being a lawyer, it depends. Like if you're writing for things like a soap or a show that's got pre-existing voices that are not yours, yes, you want to try to follow along and mimic them in some way. But the idea is, as a writer, they want your voice. They're hiring you to write like you. They already write like them. They can already do that. They've already got people to do that. What they want is for you to bring something. And that's really what I was told when my first soap opera. I was told pretty much exactly that. They already have people who write like them, where if they're hiring you, they want to know what you have to say. Also, a pretty basic note, if you're writing things like what you've already seen, it's already been seen. Like in my very first pilot script, I wrote stuff and I said, oh yeah, I've seen stuff like this before. They'll love it. And I got the consistent feedback, like, we've seen it before. So try to think of more unique ways to go about things. That doesn't mean that you can't take a premise and go, a well-known premise and go, well, what if this happened to this kind of person? That's not writing like anybody else, but you're maybe taking a premise out there and saying, well, what if it? What if this and what if that? And that can take you down really interesting roads. So one thing you need to remember as a writer also, as a dramatic writer, is that writers don't just write brilliant dialogue. They also set up great situations for their characters. And that's a really key part, especially in a very visual industry like film or TV. Which things you have, you can say, the one great advantage of that is you can say one thing and then show another on this camera. And when I give this class live, I show videos, which I am not going to do because you might get taken off YouTube if you take somebody's copywritten work and put it on the site. So I'm just going to suggest to you that you Google and find these links. And if you insist, I can send you links offline. But for example, I was a big fan of The Wire, and I don't know if you two are either. But there's a brilliant scene in which two cop characters are going into, and they're investigating a crime scene where a murdered body was found. And the only word of dialogue in the scene is the word fuck. But through the way they use the word fuck, and you can tell the process of their investigation, what they're thinking, who they're suspecting, because essentially it's the situation that you've set up for these two characters, and you can follow it with crystal clear logic, even though you only have the one word fuck used. And the show, what is it, Mixed-ish, did a similar take on that. It's in a sitcom world where two sisters had an entire conversation only using the word girl. Girl, girl, girl. The various ways they said it, you could tally the whole conversation. Oh, girl. But so again, it's not the beauty of the dialogue, it's how you use it and the structure you have set up to tell your story. The always ever popular show don't tell. For example, in the unutterably brilliant Get Out, my God, I love that movie. There's a moment when the lead character is meeting another Black gentleman. And we in the audience know that we've seen this guy get kidnapped, know that something's off with this. But so the lead Black guy goes up to the other Black guy, like, hey, and like puts his hand up for a fist bump. And the other Black guy, who, as we come to learn later on in the movie, has had his body taken over by an older white man, looks at the hand and goes, oh, and just like puts his hand around it like this. As he doesn't do this, he does this. And by showing that, you saw that there's a serious disconnect between these two characters. This guy does not know the appropriate social etiquette of the situation, even though he looks like and probably should know it. But they set up a situation where then the lead character is like, something is off here. This guy's, something is odd. And without a word being said, is just kind of like by this gesture, by showing that gesture, you show that these people this is something off with this character. These people are not connecting on the same level. So show, don't tell if you can, because it's always more fun to have as an audience member to see something like, oh, I bet you I know what's going on, rather than to have everything explained to you in what one of my writing teachers used to call Mickey Mouse dialogue. If you have a character saying, well, hello, brother dear, it's been 20 years since we haven't seen each other. Whatever happened to mother? Oh, didn't you hear mother died? Oh, really? What a shame. Here's my wife. I mean, it's like you sit there and like, oh my God, will you kill me now? The idea is to be more, get your dialogue, get your exposition off in a more interesting way. Like if you're showing up at a funeral, you can, by the way the characters relate to each other, you have people like smiling at the casket, like frowning at the casket, somebody can like stick their tongue out. You get to see these people have different relationships with this dead guy, where we don't exactly know who he is or who they are, but we know there's some tension here and we want to find out why. So show, don't tell, or if you have to tell for a good reason or tell it in a great way. For example, in Jerry Maguire, there's the rightfully famous You Had Me at Hello scene, where he bursts in the room and he tells her all of these reasons that he loves her and he can't have her, like, I love you, I love you, I love you, essentially is what he's saying in a really extended way. And she goes, stop, you had me at hello. And if you hadn't had that line, then when she's just gone like, oh, I love you too, it would have been, yeah, that's it again, what time is this movie over? But because you have it like, you had me at hello, that was like a brilliant cap to what might have been an otherwise relatively ordinary moment. So again, if you're going to tell for a reason or in a great way. Okay, here are some craft tricks that I was taught on my way up. Let's see, 6 lines was an exercise that I did in college, where it's just as an exercise to hone your ear for dialogue. Go and listen to a real life conversation and come back and be between two people and be able to write exactly what they said in 6 lines of conversation, presumably 3 lines from one person and 3 lines from the other person. It should be 6-line interchange. And that will hone your ear for how people actually speak, because I can't tell you how often I see stuff on a page and say, people don't talk like that. Then there's a thing called roles in conflict, which can show a lot of conflict between characters. For example, in the movie Grease, like after the movement Summer Lovin', Danny's just sung this big song to his friends about how he screwed Sandy and the sand over the summer. In the meantime, Sandy has been singing this song to her friends, her new friends, about how romantic and how timid and shy Danny was. So we've got Danny is like, I'm a stud, but actually with Sandy, he was like romantic and sweet. And then we have their first contact after the summer when Sandy, she's Danny, and Danny goes, Sandy, and then like when his boyfriend, around his friends, like, oh, Sandy. And you know that his role as the big stud and romantic hero are coming into rapid conflict. Like, how is this going to play out? Because they see him one way, she sees him in a totally different way. So you can put your characters into same character, two different roles, and put those roles into sharp conflict with each other. There's also the movie Network again, and you can ask me questions at any point. And another really brilliant movie in which there's this moment when the network is hiring these terrorists, for lack of a better word, to have a regular spot on their news program. And there's a scene where the terrorists are negotiating with the lawyers about rights and what they're going to do. And these are like communist type terrorists talking about like, I need more percentage points on this deal. Are you kidding me? But so you've got their radical political left-wing agenda fighting with their financial agenda, and they're dealing with the network. And you've got these people who are, again, their roles are in sharp conflict with what they want them to be. It's also a lesson I was taught called negotiation over objects. Essentially, the way two people relate to the same thing tells you a lot about them as well. And again, this is more situational, not so much dialogue, although dialogue, of course, goes to show you how this plays out, but it's a more situational thing. For example, in the movie, What's Love Got to Do with It? There's a moment, we think we've all heard of like the Eat the Cake anime moment, which is in a diner, and it starts off with Ike and Tina and other friends are there sitting there, and the kid comes up and asks Tina Turner for her autograph. Like, thank you, Miss Turner. And Ike's her name is Mrs. Ike Turner. So already you're getting like, that's another little role in conflict thing, like Tina Turner versus Mrs. Ike Turner. These are two different characters in Ike's mind. So then Ike orders a piece of cake, and then Tina kind of shoves it to the side. Then goes like, you have the cake. Like, I don't want the cake. Have the cake. I don't want the cake. And he like physically shoves it. Eat the cake, anime. And you know, this scene is not about that cake. It is never about that cake. It is about the relationship between these two people and this object, this little piece of cake on a plate, is used to show the dynamic between those characters.
Cheryl,
yes.
I think of a scene in The Passenger where Jack Nicholson is playing an English journalist. He's down in West Africa. He's got a camera. He's interviewing the rebel commander, and he points the camera at the commander and he asks him all these questions. The commander then turns the camera around on him and says, your questions reveal a lot more about you than my answers would about me.
Exactly. And that's a great way to do that, because you're putting that character on the spot. He's used to being, I am in charge. I am on this side of the camera. But then you switch it. And then it's like, when you're on that side of the camera, who are you then? And this image here that I brought up is again from Get Out, and talk about negotiations over object. They literally make the lead character in this piece into an object that they're now auctioning off and selling. So, I mean, it plays into like the whole nature of like reincarnation of slavery in this movie, etc. But this thought of talk about negotiation over objects. Here we are literally negotiating over this character as an object. So when you're drafting, welcome to the wonderful world of drafts. Again, take what works for you and discard anything else. I will not take it personally. I usually just like to start when I'm writing on something with what I call the brain dump draft. It doesn't need to be good. It doesn't need to be sensible. Just like all of these ideas that I'm spewing, and it probably won't even be dialogue at this point. Just like she needs to start the car and drive really fast at some point. Does she run into something? ? I'm just typing all that stuff on the page. So I just get it out of your head and onto the page. Then you have something to work with. It's always easier to work with something on a page than figure out, but what if this, what if that? Start planning it through. If this, then that. If this, then that. You start to figure it out, and you figure out, you know what, I like the if this then that better than the if this then that. So let's follow that pathway down. Then in the soap world, and I still do this for myself, they can call it a one for nothing, essentially like writing out like the lamest dialogue possible. You don't love me. Don't say that. Why shouldn't I say that? You don't love me, but you don't know that I don't love you. Yes, I do. Just like write the crappy dialogue, just get it out of your system. Get across the point that you need to make. The point of the scene is he doesn't love her and she knows and she suspects it. And what happens as a result of that? Just like type off the crappy dialogue and just like, this is what happens in this scene. Okay, done. Then you get to go back and do like the more fun part of like, well, what's a more interesting way of going about her for her accusing him how you don't love me? It's like, did you pick up my medication today? Like, oh no, I forgot. Really, you forgot? You always forget. You know, you always forget to do these things. So then you get from take a different approach for her to realize and make the statement like he doesn't care about her the way that she feels that he should. You come at it in a different way. That's like the surprise draft. I mean, I call it like look at different ways to come at the scene and come at the point that you want to make, what you want to make in the scene. It's another reason to know, much as you love a scene, if it doesn't serve your script, it's gotta go. Because the scene needs to, ideally a scene should forward the action or show you something about character or serve some purpose other than just wonderful flights of dialogue fancy. And I know this because when I've done wonderful flights of dialogue fancy, they often get cut unless they relate to the action that the scene needs to accomplish. I also do what I call a character pass on my scripts because nobody is the villain in their own story. Everybody is the hero or heroine of their own tale. So I attack each scene in the script as like, what does this world look like from character B's point of view? Because we got to run character A as like lead and like driving the action. What does the world look like from character B's point of view? Oh, well, character B comes to the scene this way. The character B is wondering, well, why is A doing that? I don't understand. Maybe I should do this with C. So even though they're in the same scene, they've got differing goals. And the way character B attacks the scene may modify how character A does it. Again, it's like throwing rocks at your character, because character A has a goal and character B can help them or stop them. And character B needs to think, well, if I help them, this happens. If I stop them, what happens? Why should I help character A? So the character B's got to go through that thought process so you know how the scene's going to play out in the best way possible. You can just have character B be what you call a straw man and just set up arguments for character A to knock down and just accomplish their goal. But that's not nearly as fun as like, you got to duck and dodge and get past character B. Okay, and as a larger general matter, it's like, what do you want to say or show? I mean, how many times have you seen a show and you're ahead of the action? I can't say ideally because it's just ideal for me. Ideally, I want to say something that connects to people, that resonates with people. But more specifically, you got to think of what do you want to say in a specific script? What is it you want to leave the audience thinking or feeling? I'm not saying how necessarily you say it, but you should know, like, I want the audience to root for so-and-so. I want them to hate so-and-so. If you say, I don't care what the audience thinks of so-and-so, then I think that's more problematic, because then what is it you want the audience to care about and leave with? And that's definitely an approach. But again, be clear on what you want. If you don't want the audience to feel, then acknowledge that and think and act accordingly. And that's how that will affect how you craft your screenplay. And so that's the thing about craft, is I view craft as, when I was a baby writer, I turned down my little brown nose. I looked down my little brown nose at craft, because I thought like, oh, well, that's handcuffing me. That's limiting my creativity. I can't follow your silly rules. And to a large extent, some of the silly rules have become ingrained in me, so I don't even think about it as craft anymore. But I view craft as a toolbox to help me get out of problems when I write myself up a tree. As I can go da 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 da, and I realize, like, wait, this scene isn't working. Why isn't this scene working? Okay, let me pull back from the brilliant dialogue and go things like, what is the scene supposed to accomplish? Who's driving the scene? is this the best way to attack the scene? Is this the best way to get this point across and show this dynamic? It's essentially like, it's a series of questions that I start asking myself, like, it doesn't work, why? And craft can give you a list of questions. Is it, am I doing this? Check. Am I doing this? Check. Oh, I'm not doing that. What if I try that? That might work, and you might your way out of the scene. So one thing I used to do, and I've gotten over now, is like, I used to stress over each line when I wrote it. It was precious. I don't do that anymore. I feel like, because I never finished anything, and I've got to hone this. This line isn't perfect. This line isn't perfect. That's another part of the, like, just get it out, just get it out, just get it out on the page. So characters can explore, like, your characters can do different things. Your characters can take a journey and you go with them, or they can explore a situation. They don't necessarily need to go any place other than internally and realize their relationship to the people around them in the situation. That is that's all up to you. What do you want to do? Let it be an experiment. It is a wonderful experiment that you are undertaking. And that is it for my slideshow. And
Thank
any
you
more
so
questions?
much, Cheryl. We have some questions. Terry said, "Hey, Cheryl, my team for the shootout is my improv group." Interesting.
Okay.
I would love for our piece to be improvised. Any advice in terms of preparation? I know we won't have the prompt yet. We don't have the prompt yet, but beforehand, if we can.
Okay, beforehand. If you're improv group, you can probably come up with ideas who your characters are going to be. You don't know what situation they're going to be in, but you can start coming up with, well, like, I'm going to play this kind of character, I'm going to play that kind of character. So you can start thinking about already their roles, their dynamics with each other, and their roles in this dynamic. And you can view the prompt as it's a catalyst you throw into this group of people who have their own tensions and feelings, and then you put them in this situation. It's like, what do we do now? But we know what we know who we are to each other, and we know what we've got to deal with is the situation involving the prompt. And I will tell you one of my favorite scenes in one of my plays came out of an improv writing exercise, in which I took the two improvers aside, and I gave them their goals outside the hearing of each other. I said, this is your goal, and this is your goal, character A, character B. And character A came barreling into the scene. I want this. And character B was like taken aback. It was like, but I want that. It was like, oh, well, then it was like, when it was like a real world situation, actually, to be specific. A white teacher was going into the principal's office to demand that her Black teacher friend keep her job. The white principal intends not to fire the Black teacher, but the white teacher who's just barreled into his office. So in the improv situation, the white teacher walks in with all nobility. It's like, I know what you're going to do, and you can't do it. You can't fire her. And the principal goes, I'm not firing her. I'm firing you. But the way he's processing, like, what? And the actor said afterwards, I had prepared about, she's going to be sad, she's going to be so upset she gets fired. But the teacher was like, no, that's not what's happening here. I know what you're doing. You're really firing her. Like, no, seriously, I'm firing you. And but so again, it's like each character has their own goals and their own perspectives. So you can set up that kind of thing beforehand. And it may work in the prompt or it may not, but at least it may give you a head start.
I love
UP
that.
sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a lot of fun.
What does? I'm sorry?
What you described sounds like a lot of fun.
It is.
Sort of along those lines, when I first started making short movies, I would make them with friends, and I would invite friends to come over. Before they got there, I would take a nap, and I would dream and visualize what I wanted to film. Then I jump up just as I got there, and I would direct them what to do, and I would simply film and direct them in what I had seen in my head. So to this day, when I write, and this is along the lines of your 6 lines of dialogue, it's not, I don't sit at my keyboard and write lines. Instead, I do whatever I'm doing, about whether I'm working out at the gym or anything, and I see in my mind, or I hear in my mind these people, and then I go and I try to put down on paper the experience that I want the audience to see. And I agree with you in a lot of what you said, especially the high context exposition. But I, uh, I, in terms of the stakes, I think that for me, the stakes that are important are not so much the stakes that that character has, but the stakes in the mind or heart of the spectator who is getting engaged with that character. Those are the stakes that I feel are key. Since, I mean, it's bizarre, but most of our brain is concerned with emotion and not with thoughts, after all, you know. And when I write, I find that at the core of what I write is not conflict, but it's desire. So consequently, everything I write takes at its core a character. So I tend to write about characters. Yeah.
And that's great. But as you write about, the characters often have warring desires and conflicting desires. And
It's
I
a little
think
more
in
complicated than that. I asked my actor to portray a character who in turn is creating several different social personas, which are often in conflict with each other.
oh,
So that, for instance, I wrote a play about Mata Hari, and she was simply a Dutch housewife who got very upset with her marriage. And then when she started turning 40, she freaked out, created this alternate persona of Mata Hari, the spy. Parisian society condemned her for stepping out from her marriage, etc. Her roles, her social personas got so much in conflict that they executed her. So I asked the actors of that character to create separate personas that were in conflict with each other, and that was the role, and that became a full-length play in New York. Yeah.
Paul, I would love to stop you right there. We are about time. If you love to